Basically what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going over different resources and highlighting different resources from Songs and Voices Together, and also worship resources and Voices Together, as well as resources from Together in Worship and from Leader Magazine. One of the reasons we wanted to do this is in part because we do have these different sources from which we can pull to be able to inform and to enrich our Lenten services. It also helps to show that that Anabaptist Worship Network, Together in Worship, Voices Together team, and Leader Magazine are working in concert with one another to be able to provide programming and resources for all of you, and we're not in competition with one another. So with that said, I've introduced myself. I just want to introduce and have the rest of the team who's leading this morning introduce themselves as well.
I can go first. My name is Annalie Leptison. I am one of the co-directors of Anabaptist Worship Network. So glad to see all of you joining us today. And if you're watching the recording, we're glad that you've found this and hope it's helpful. I am a PhD student at the University of Ottawa, so I worship with Ottawa Mennonite Church. I was on the Voices Together hymnal committee, and I'm also in the summer the director of Ontario Mennonite Music Camp. Let's go to Joanna.
I'm Joanna Herder. I pastor at Peace Mennonite Church in Lawrence, Kansas, and I was on the team from Western District Conference that put together the worship resources in Leader Magazine for this Lenten season. And Carol.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carol Penner, and I'm talking to you today from Waterloo, where I teach practical theology at Conrad Grebel University College. I've been a pastor for many years, and one of the things I do is write worship materials, and this is my blog, Leading in Worship. I'll put the link in the chat. It's not something we're talking about today, but it's part of who I am. Thanks.
All right, excellent. Sorry, I was writing something. Sorry, I was writing something in the chat for someone who had a question. So, at any rate, let's go ahead and get started because some of the things that we're going to highlight today are going to be readings. There are certain things that we try to really also bring out different resources from different cultural backgrounds, some things that may be new to some of you, since obviously most of us have been doing Lent in some form or fashion for quite some time now. So being able to provide new resources is something that we would like to focus on here. So I'd like to go ahead and start with Joanne, who is going to talk to us about resources in Leader Magazine.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so you probably, hopefully, have your copy of Leader Magazine with the worship resources here. And you may be familiar with the pattern of different conferences are invited to put together teams to provide resources for Leader. And it came around to Western District this last time around for Lent. And so I was on that team, and Melissa Atchison is with us. She was also part of that team. Joanna Pinkerton, I don't think she's on yet, but she may be popping in. So there were several of us that worked together. I will give full disclosure, in my 12 years of being a Mennonite pastor, I've never once taken the Leader worship materials and just used them all the way. That might work for your congregation, but the idea is that even if it's not completely your cup of tea or fitting your worship style, there's lots of good pieces in here. And the way our team worked, partly due to COVID and just not being able to get together in person and being distanced from each other, we kind of mostly paired up, or a couple of people even worked on their own to work on different pieces of it. So you may find that there's a different feeling to different parts, and there may be some pieces that work really well for your congregation, even if some of the others don't. So I would encourage you to look through. It's based on the Revised Common Lectionary scripture readings. And as our team kind of read through and prayed through that, what we kept coming back to was this idea of God's way, and how this passage from Isaiah, my thoughts are not your thoughts and my ways are not your ways. And thinking about so many of the scriptures that we're reading with the lectionary and Lent kind of show how human ways don't work so well and encourage us towards more godly ways. And that's what we structured the sessions around. And so each one has a theme. For example, the first one is moving from security to generosity, this idea of abundance and being able to give of ourselves. So each week we're thinking about moving from one way of being into a more faithful way of being. One of the things I think is really lovely about this material is the visual resources. Joanna Pinkerton created those. I don't know if you've seen her work before, but she's a really great artist and fabulous human being. And Annalie has a few images to share. There are two options for the front table displays, and this one involves 3 boxes that are nesting boxes that are opened as part of a ritual each week. That it's just really cool, and there's even instructions on how to make the boxes for people who aren't quite that crafty or want something different. There are also the next picture shows suggestions, just themed suggestions for each week. So this would be for the first for Lent 1, but there are suggestions for every week. The print material gives you a written description, but these photos and more details are available in the online resources through the Minomedia website. And then one thing I really love is that Joanna did pencil sketches to go with each week. And this is the one, obviously, where Jesus calls Herod a fox and talks about wanting to bring people under his wings. And those could be used on bulletin covers. They could be used for coloring sheets. And there's, with each line drawing, there are reflection questions to kind of help people. They can be used then, so during the week, as sort of a meditative personal prayer time. So I think some of the visual resources that are part of this are really helpful. Thanks, Annalie. There's also worship liturgies, and Melissa is gonna read the first call to worship with me to just give you a sense of what that is. Together we seek the way of God.
Through the wilderness of Lent, through the wilderness of life.
We crave the safety of God's shelter,
the cool comfort of the divine shadow, the security of the holy fortress.
God offers the care of angels,
the gentleness of creation, the protection of love.
God is generous to all who call on the holy name.
So come, let us seek God's way of generosity.
Thanks, Melissa. So for each Sunday in Lent, there is a call to worship. There's a thematic prayer, a prayer of confession, some sending words, blessing words that are suggested. And again, some of them will work for you and some of them won't, but they're there for you to use as they are, or to just inspire you. There's music suggestions. People much more knowledgeable about music than I went through and found hymns that could relate. Most of what's there is from Voices Together. There's also quite a few suggestions of more contemporary songs that are covered under the CCLI license. There's a couple of holdouts, I think, suggested from someone in my congregation who is working on this from the old hymnal worship book, because we just can't quite let go yet. But these are, lots of hymns to choose from, far more than you would use, but hopefully within the suggestions, some that would be comfortable for your congregation. And there's a children's time. And I also have a little screenshot here of the video that's available through the Minnow Media website. Annalie can share that real quick. It's a llama and a puppy. So there are all these scripts of the llama and the puppy every week talking about the Bible story in kind of a kid-friendly version. You may or may not have people in your church who can pull off a puppet show. For those who are online, there are videos of each of these too, and you could show those as part of online worship or project them if you don't have the capacity to do them live. So that's another aspect. And then the last piece for each week is a sermon starter. So just some thoughts, and Melissa worked on these, just some thoughts about the scriptures, but particularly then how they relate to the theme that we're suggesting for that week. I was just looking through them today, and I was really impressed at how much they were able to get in one little paragraph. So it's not your sermon for the week, but hopefully some inspiration for a direction for your sermon for the week. So I think there's some really, I had a good time working with everyone on these resources, and I expect that most congregations could find some pieces of this that would be helpful in your context. Oh, Richard, you're still muted.
My fault. Thank you so much, Joanna. So we're going to talk a little bit now about some of the Lenten song resources in Voices Together. Obviously, there is a section in the collection that talks, that's specifically about Jesus' ministry. There's one about Jesus' journey. There's one that's entitled Journey to the Cross. But there are other resources throughout Voices Together that can be very effective for Lenten as well. And the resources that I'm bringing here mostly fall under a couple categories. There's confession and repentance songs, because Lent is a time where we recognize that that we are not all as we should be. There are also songs of there's also songs of lament, because we recognize in Lent also that the world is not as it should be. And but then also there's some that I have a couple songs as well for that could be used for Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, sort of times as well. We are not going to talk about Easter. There was a webinar that done last year for the Easter season, and that will be, and that resource is also available on to watch on YouTube. I believe Annalie just put that in the chat for everyone, so take a look at that if you desire. So let me get started though with this beautiful song by Shirley Rayner Murray, New Zealand hymn writer. As far as I'm concerned, she never misses, and this is no exception. This is 149 in Voices Together. It's called Forgive Us, Holy God. And what I love about this hymn is that it really calls us to awaken from the slumber of our own comfort and cynicism. It really falls right in line with what Joanna was talking about, from security to generosity. Some of the words in here, for example, this second verse really strikes me. Forgive us that our souls are numb to scenes of terror, screams of pain, that while we pray for your kingdom come, our world is still a battle plain. The third verse says, forgive the minds no longer shocked by homeless poor, by lives abused. Forgive us that the earth is stacked with weapons waiting to be used. And then forgive us that our household gods are self and safety, private need. Forgive us all our fitful prayers, the token gift, the token deed. And so I encourage you to, if that is the direction that your church is going for Lent this season, to use that hymn. It is excellent. It's sung very easily as well, so I would definitely encourage it. Another hymn that I encourage would be number 153. This is also a hymn of confession, called Perdón, Señor. It's number 153, Perdón, Señor. The refrain is in Spanish entirely. The verses that the leader will sing are in English. There are a couple nice things about this. One, the fact that it's call and response very easily, and the response is very, very easy to sing. Secondly, the fact that the words are very simple, but they're very poignant as well. So we're asking God for forgiveness for grievance and injustice, for aloofness and indifference, for weakness and transgression, for resistance and rebellion. So very simple but yeah, very profound. It's actually written by George Lockward. I think he actually pronounced it to Georgie. I've met him a couple of times. He's the director of Global Praise Program of the General Board of Global Ministries for the United Methodist Church. It's funny, actually, there are a couple of United Methodist resources that I'll be highlighting today. I once heard someone say that they believe that Charles Wesley and Menno Simons would have been friends. But and I do think that may very well be true. There are a lot of songs and resources that come out of the Anabaptist tradition that resonate with Methodists and Wesleyans. I think vice versa as well. But this response, and by the way, I want to try this, but this will require all of us to be muted so that all you're hearing is me and yourself. Otherwise, this won't work. So I did want to give this a shot, though. So this refrain is very, very simple. It's just it's Perdón, Señor. That's all it is. Perdón, Señor. Perdón, Señor. Sing that to yourself. Perdón, Señor. So the verse comes. For grievance and injustice, perdón, Señor. Aloofness and indifference, perdón, Señor. For weakness and transgression, perdón, Señor. Resistance and rebellion, perdón, Señor. In your eternal mercy, perdón, Señor. In your sustaining grace, perdón, Señor. Okay, so as you can see, very, very simple. I think it's something that could potentially even be done if you're doing Zoom worship, so long as everyone else is muted. Okay, next hymn I'd like to highlight is What Can I Leave Behind? This is number 154. I'm highlighting this one in part because I believe that I am contractually obligated to highlight an Adam Tice hymn from Voicing Together. I'm kidding. No, it's because his songs are great. But I absolutely love this hymn, the ideas behind it. It really kind of puts a different idea, the different spin, because of that idea of giving something up for Lent. We talk about that in culture, giving something up for Lent, and this really puts a kind of expounds on that idea and puts that idea in a different context. So I just like to share this for a moment. Benjamin Berkey, Benjamin Berkey was very gracious in sharing with us a video. So I'd just like to play that for us now of this hymn. So here we go.
What can I leave behind? What old and weary ways that weigh upon my mind and strain my song of praise? God grant release from binding pain, and let me gain your hope and peace. What can I claim once more? Can life return from loss? What future lies in store if I take up my cross? My burden raised, Christ bears it too. In all I do, may God be praised. What can I take to share a neighbor's crushing load? What burdens can we bear together on the road? We walk and pray with Christ our guide, who by our side will show the way.
So thank you. Yeah, that is What Can I Leave Behind. Next song I'd like to highlight is it's called in our hymnal, We Are Often Tossed and Driven. It's number 311 in worship, number 311 in word and voices together. I know it as We'll Understand It Better by and by. I believe that's the more common title for it, but obviously it's called We Are Often Tossed and Driven. It's by Charles Albert Tindley, who is also a African-American. He was an African-American self-educated Methodist pastor, had possibly the first mega church in the United Methodist Church. It was Tindley Temple, United Methodist Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Amazing songwriter, and if Thomas Dorsey is the father of Black gospel music, many would say that Charles Tindley is the grandfather. He wrote more in the style of your late 19th, early 20th century gospel songs, but the themes that he brought out really helped to influence people like Thomas Dorsey and other early what we call Black gospel writers. I won't say much more about this one, but this is a song that really is a song of lament in a lot of ways. We are often tossed and driven by the restless seas of time, somber skies and howling tempests oft succeed a bright sunshine. In that land of perfect day, when the mists have rolled away, we will understand it better by and by. So it is a song of lament, but it's interesting because it's a very joyful sounding song of lament at the same time. It's very lovely to sing. I would encourage it if you have opportunity to do so. The next song I'd like to highlight is number 566. This is called Samlandela. It is a Zulu song it's a Zulu song from Zimbabwe. And one of the ways, and I think of this song as an opportunity that we can use on like a Palm Sunday or a Passion Sunday, because the words are really, we will follow Jesus everywhere he goes. It's the type of song that I would almost like to use ironically, or that could be used ironically in the sense of you can have the congregation singing, being a part of the story on Palm Sunday, saying, yes, we will follow, or we could have, think of it as Peter saying, God, even if everyone else leaves you, I will never leave you. I will always follow you. And then as we know, some of the very people in that crowd, who were saying Hosanna in the highest, were later on, a week later saying, crucify him. And Peter, saying, no, I would never leave you. Even if everyone falls away, hours later, he's denying Jesus. And so it can really be used powerfully in that way if we are willing to sort of lean into the story and make ourselves part of the story as we sing. We will follow. It can also be used, outside of that context as well. But here's a little bit of how I just wanted to play you a little bit of this so you can hear how it can go. This is a cappella, so something like this. Somlandela, somlandelu Jesu, somlandela, yonke indawo. Somlandelu Jesu, la foia kona somlandela. We will follow Jesus. We will follow everywhere he goes. We will follow Jesus. Everywhere he goes, we will follow. And the Zulu is relatively easy and simple in this song. I would say the only word that might trip you up is the Iyakona. If it's hard to get a congregation of non-Zulu speaking people to do clicks, but I don't think anyone would complain that much if you didn't do the click. I think it'd be okay, but yeah, so that's another that's another great resource. And finally, I'd like to finish with the song 493 in Voices Together. This is All the Room Was Hushed and Still. This is a song talking about foot washing, and talking about that night in the upper room with Jesus and his disciples. And it's from famous contemporary music, Christian music artist Graham Kendrick. It's gorgeous, and if you don't mind, I'd like to play just a little bit of it for you. As we finish up here. Again, not difficult to sing. Really sort of tells the story beautifully, and brings it home and brings it home when it says, when sort of paraphrasing Jesus, saying, this is what I'm asking for you. This is why I'm kneeling here beside you. This is what I want my church to be. This is what I want the world to see, who it is you follow. So listen to this just for a few moments here.
All the room was hushed and still, and when the bowl was filled, he stooped to wash their feet. And when it was complete, he said, this is what I'm asking you to do. This is why I'm kneeling here beside you. This This is what I want my church to be. This is what I want the world to see. Who it is you follow. Love each other, one another. Love each other in the way that I have loved you. Walk together, and whatever comes, love each other in the way that I have loved you.
All right, thank you so much for your time, and I'd like to pass it along now to Carol, who will be talking to us about resources in Together in Worship.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here today. I just want to say first that you are all doing a great job. I have so much admiration for pastors who are working so hard in this pandemic years and through all the stress of many different things that we've been through. And so the work you're doing in worship is so central. So thank you for doing that. And as I share resources, I want to tell you that you don't have to use any resources if you don't want to. Like if you come up with ideas yourself, that is great. And if you just need some ideas, you can look at resources and go with it, some ideas, and then write your own. Or if you were too tired to write your own, it is perfectly fine to find resources and use even a whole service. And it's all good. Whatever you need to do, you know your congregation's best. And you have the wisdom to lead the people you are leading well. So what I want to share about is a website called togetherinworship.net. I put the little link in the chat. If you don't know what this is, it's an Anabaptist worship resource that a bunch of volunteers got together to create around, we started in 2018, a group of binational committee of people who loved worship. And we partnered with a couple of organizations, especially Common Word. We're partnered with Anabaptist Worship Network, but we are entirely independent. We don't get money from the churches. We're not a part of any conference. We just love worship, and we want to share a variety of resources that are created within the Anabaptist community. So I'll just show you the website that we created. It's called Together in Worship, and it is pretty easy to use. Up here, there's a box. You can just type in anything, and hopefully some resources will come up. You can also just scroll down, and there's a section here, Lent resources, a curated collection. Just click on it and see what you find. Or what you can also do is go to this Explore All Resources button, and there you'll get a list of all our filters. So we have 358 calls to worship. We have all sorts of different topics, all church seasons, and it's even divided up by lectionary if you are going with the lectionary. So there's lots of different things to look at in Together in Worship. I just want to highlight that the leader resources are so great, but it may be that this year's leader doesn't seem to click with you or your congregation. The great thing about Together in Worship is that we offer probably 20 years of past leader resources. You don't have to dig through your files to see, is there anything else to use? The worship series are all on here. Restore Us, O God. This is from 2017. It's all online. You can find it here. And as I was looking through these, I thought I should also mention that all of the items within each of these leader resources is cataloged separately. So for example, here's a confession and assurance, and it came from 2017. And so you can also search for just little bits, or you can look for a whole series. Also on our website, Together in Worship, we have whole services that we have found from pastors who've created them. So here is this great worship resource, a Good Friday Tenebrae service, the fear of the Lord. And what I really liked about this service was that I thought, even if you have to go back online, hopefully not, hopefully we are done with the pandemic, but if this would adapt really well to online because it's different speakers speaking, and it would be pretty easy to put that online as well. On our website, we also have songs. So here's an Easter anthem. I know we're supposed to be talking about Lent, but I do talk a little bit about Easter. And you could play something like that with online worship. There's also a series of stories, children's stories, and Carrie Martins has a great storytelling series around Lent and Easter. And sometimes you just wonder, it's hard to talk to kids about the death of Jesus. How would I do that? And here's a video of someone doing it. And it gives you some ideas about what to do, or you could show the video if you want to. So lots of different ways you can do that. Joanna has graciously agreed that we can show some of her worship resources on our website here. And we just love her work. And I'll just read to you this beautiful call to worship. While it says it's leader and people, it would be perfectly fine to read this with one voice and just ask the congregation. You'd say, when I say Christ is risen at the end, please respond with Christ is risen indeed. And I ask you to do that when I'm finished. Carrying Friday's stale grief, we come to see the tomb. We come to mourn on solid ground and instead find the earth shifting beneath our feet. We expect bloody grave clothes and instead see the gleaming white robe of the angel who says, I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. And our hearts swell with fear and great joy as we run to share the news. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed. Thank you, Joanna, for that. I could also see this as a reading for two readers at the front. And I would imagine them starting very quietly, like maybe almost whispering, carrying Friday's stale grief. We come to see the tomb. And then just getting a little bit louder each time to the end where our hearts swell with fear and great joy. So it's like this dynamic getting louder. And it just seems like there's a dramatic flow to this call to worship. And I really like it. I could even see the two readers as they are saying these words coming into the congregation, leaving the podium and going to the middle of the congregation and saying together, Christ is risen, and then being surrounded with the congregation saying, Christ is risen indeed. So it's like you're going out to share the good news away from the pulpit. So I really think that that's a great call to worship. Oh yeah, here is just one I wrote as well. It's from my website. I hope you don't mind. I put one of my own in. God of great gifts, this morning we give you praise. We give you glory. We give you thanks. With resurrection humming in our hearts, our minds are tuned to your song of peace. We joyfully present these gifts to you, a tangible chorus of thanksgiving, a harmony of hope for your kingdom come. Amen. I could also see this happening in a little more creative way than just one person reading it. If you have someone who could just start a note, just ask people to hum and to harmonize, or just hum that note. And as the congregation is just humming, the person reading reads the voice of this over the chorus of the congregation. And I think that would be pretty powerful as well. So I hope that you will find some resources on Together in Worship, if not during Lent, but through some time in the year. And we also welcome submissions. If you create something that you'd love to share, there's a share your resources button. So think about that. And I wish you all well in your worship planning.
Carol, we just got a question in the chat about copyright and Together in Worship. Do you want to just explain whether people need to get copyright?
Absolutely. We have only put things up on the website that are Creative Commons, that they are allowed to be used in worship. All you have to do is put in your bulletin who wrote it and just make an acknowledgement of the author, and that's fine. Or if you change it to say with revisions, And so even the videos can all be shared. They're all copyright to be used.
Awesome, thanks. I am just going to speak for I'm going to give you just a little whirlwind of just a handful of worship resources and Voices Together that are around Lent and Holy Week. And then we'll go into our breakout groups, which are optional too. So I don't want to keep us too much longer here. This has been, I'm sure your brains are just exploding with so many resources, but I'll just highlight a few worship resources yet. There we go. So I'm starting by highlighting one by Joanna Heriter. we're all highlighting each other's work, which is awesome. I love it. And this one, I just love the kind of, like has already been discussed, the kind of how far do we go, and when do we pull out with our following of Jesus? And so we're happy to join the crowd waving branches, but not so sure we want to follow you to the foot of the cross. So I think this is just super powerful, the words of this one, and see it being a really poignant one this year too. So that's one. Then this one feels just, I read it again recently and was like, oh, I needed this just in our current situation, our current kind of climate with COVID and so many other things that are happening. I'll just read it for us. That huge why held deep inside us all, or spat out occasionally, isn't an intellectual question. It's a cry of agony. There are no answers, only the waiting, the walking alongside, the being here. Only the giving of what we do not have, the love that comes as we give it. The incredible risk of love demands more of us than easy answers and pretty prayers. That one is written by Joy Mead, who's in England. It's from 2017, and I just love how raw it is. The last one I'll highlight here is, I was going to highlight too that in your worship leader edition, if you have it. If you don't, I highly recommend it. I always say it's the best kept secret of Voices Together, is this book that is just full of gold. And so if you are interested in foot washing or want some more information about it, or want to access the foot washing resources, there's a bit about foot washing in the worship leader edition. And then there's also resources around number 950 in your Voices Together for foot washing. And the last one is a bit of word art. It's poetry by Dallas Weeb. We were really intentional with worship resources about including Mennonite poetry. And so you see this one where the words create a cross. And so there's this kind of visual dimension to it that is really powerful as well. And the words are very expressive too. And so that's just kind of an interesting one to draw your attention to. If you saw it and didn't realize that it made a cross, just something to kind of highlight there. And so there's many more. The best way to access the worship resources around Lent and Holy Week is by using the index and Voices Together, because they're not organized. There's not a Lent section. They're kind of throughout. And so highly recommend that you check that out using the index as well. So that's the end of our tour of resources here. There's so much more that we haven't highlighted, but hopefully this has given you some tools to figure out where to look for those things, whether in Voices Together, Leader Magazine, Together in Worship. And if there's something you're still looking for, encourage some crowdsourcing, asking what other people are using or if they've created resources for it. So you can always do that in the Anabaptist Worship Network Facebook group, or you can reach out to myself, to the awn@ambs.edu address, which has been circulated on the posters, or to any of us panelists too. We are going to go into, this has been recorded, we're going to post that to YouTube if you want to go back and look at anything that we talked about. And then we're going to go into a time of breakout groups now. So I know breakout groups are not for everyone, and if this has been enough information for you, that's excellent. And thank you for joining us. But if you want to stick around and chat with other people, we will do that. I'm going to turn off recording here.